I am following through on my promise of sorts from the last video where I was like, I am going to treat this like a real super serious devlog and basically just make some documentation for the design aspects of the game. This isn't really how I work, but I understand the need when you're in a real team, you got amazing designers. I'm not an amazing designer, but you know what? I can try to be something. The game needs to be kind of casual friendly. Think like Hearthstone. I'm old. I've been doing art for a long time. If I start gaming a little bit too aggressively, just pressing all the buttons, my hand just isn't going to cooperate with me when I need to do that same thing for 3D art, programming, all that other stuff. If you're a youngin', you probably don't have to worry about this right now, but I'm approaching 40. So I attempted some ideas of skills and narration, but I'll flesh that out later. So that's the general gist of the first pass for the designs. Combat distance. It took me 2 days of working on the combat slot system before I completely scrapped it. And this was a great example of when prompting or asking a LLM for help goes wrong. When it comes down to character distancing, the game that I'm most familiar with that does this quite well is World of Warcraft. And my problem was that when I try to research this topic using Gemini Deep Research is amazing, but you have to be really careful because you don't want it to research down the wrong path for your game. In my case, I made the really big mistake of heavily referencing World of Warcraft distancing, and the Gemini Deep Research really got caught into using a attack slot system. Meanwhile, all I had to do was just adjust some parameters in my nav mesh agent in Unity. It comes in by default. It works. It was really cool because I got to learn something new, but it was completely useless for what I was trying to do. It was too much. It was too fancy. It was too over-engineered. But that's the problem with these LLMs. If you ask it help with something, it'll give you help. But do you really need that help? Should you be going down that route? In my case, after 2 days of working with this system, absolutely not. I scrapped it and it was all working. So here's the bad attack slot. So my character's going, it's like, okay, I got you. And then they get stuck in this infinite loop and just jump off the map. And the reason why this is happening, if they both find their slot, but they're both moving, they're forever moving, and they're never reaching their slot. After I figured out the character spacing, I decided to really focus on group formation. I created this system where it allows me to create nodes that allows me to set exactly where my formation offset is. So here you'll see I've added labels to them, and these are just nodes that I can just manually move by hand and adjust. For now, I just have 3 positions, and they path using this formation in mind as they go through the game. I had a wonderful comment about issues with the way my nav mesh has been set up in game. They made a great point about the challenges with jumping and getting stuck. So I had to modify my characters. So there is no real jumping in my game. Even though the characters look like they're jumping, their actual collision and nav agent do not move with it. So everything is on the floor, only the vertices are moving. I just did this to simplify it. After the formation, I wanted to work on the enemy spawn system. When I'm concepting an idea in script, I usually use ChatGPT or Gemini. In this case, I just described it what I want. There's a group, and within that group, you can move it. And with the gizmo on, you'll see that the group itself has a trigger radius. And basically, if you come in to that radius, any enemy this group holds aggroes you. They target you and they attack you. Instead of controlling the enemies individually in their aggro radius, this group triggers all the containing child enemy characters. So here I also go in and show you an example of what it looks like when I create enemy characters within this group. I can't really make too much commentary on the script design itself. When I'm designing, I'm just really focusing on, does it do exactly what I want in game? But as far as the parameters and how it's set up, I'll let ChatGPT, Gemini, or Claude figure that out. I don't get too caught up on the detail so long as the feature actually works. So back to this, we got the add new spawn location, and I can just duplicate it. And from there, I have to assign a prefab to it. One thing that's nice about this setup is once I assign a prefab, I can visually see exactly what the node looks like with a character in it. And from here, I can move the node and rotate and make the pack look more natural. I want to add life to the way the characters look in their formation by adjusting and making them look more organic and more natural in their environment. And once I've set up the enemies, then I can just play the game and see them go. And here's my friendly characters making their way through the map. So now we have a working basic spacing and aggro, but the next thing I need to do is I need to add character health and character damage. And I'm keeping it super basic right now, just basic health and basic damage. Obviously, the final game will have a lot more different ways a character can do damage, but right now it's just damage per attack and maximum health. So here, I added all of the necessary character data, and this is the zoom in of the character health and the attack stats. These are components that are on the prefab itself. Now with the basic data of the characters set up, I can focus on the floating damage text that I want in the game. In this game, there's going to be a DPS aspect to it. I really like numbers popping up. Think like Diablo. This is the fun part when I use the Gemini deep research properly. In this case, I wanted to use the Diablo 4 style as my inspiration in my deep research. But here's a very key important thing that I had to specify. When I took all of this deep research into Claude and pasted it in, I specifically asked Claude to think deeply about properly setting up the default values in the best way for it to visually make sense. Because sometimes there's just so many parameters that get outputted by these LLMs when they're generating their fancy code. And I can get a little bit overwhelmed trying to tweak every little parameter because their estimations of what a default value should be was really bad. So in this case, I had a lot of success by asking it, please choose good default values. And I described what that means. And I got a really good result right out of the box. All of the UI elements that are generated in game, they're all world space elements. And here you can see the scriptable object that was created. Here are all of the parameters you have to tune. Not a big fan of trying to figure it out because I didn't write the code, so I don't have deep knowledge of how it works. Asking for nice default values really helped, so I didn't have to try to course correct so much by adjusting the parameters and guessing what does what. So here's what that looks like in game. My camera is still not set up. I set this up before I had a working camera. So you can see the text is floating and they're all facing towards the camera in my scene that I'm not using yet. But hey, it works, it looks good, and it didn't require too much adjustment for me. So I'm happy there. Next thing I want is a flash on hit effect. This is super useful to communicate to the player like, hey, you're getting hit. There is a color tint. I've added this to my characters. This is what the component looks like. There's a duration for how long you want the hit to last, at least the visual representation of that hit. Here's a zoomed in image of the flash on hit script. Super simple, right? All I want is a duration for how long. I'm just going to call it a tint, but it's basically, I set it to white. And here's the gameplay. The characters approach like normal, sped up a little bit. When they hit, bam, flash of a white effect. And I think it's a really nice reinforcement of the damage indicator. But we're going to get a bunch of these. We're going to add a few more to be like, hey, this is damage is happening. And you're going to have a lot of indicators that tell you that's what's happening. And here is me covering the world space UI. This is how the damage is being indicated in the UI and also now the health bar. And the nice thing about using the LLMs, they guided me through this process. I was aware of this, but I'm not using this approach day to day. Here's how I've set up my health bar. And this is a representation in Photoshop. It's a very basic setup. You'll notice that I have the background, I have the fill, and then I have the frame around everything. In the game, they're all set to white so that I could tint them. So here's the game version, and I'm just going to separate out the layers so you can see, hey, here's the frame, here's the background, and here is the fill. And the fill is set to a horizontal mask so that you can mask it out. From here, I have a health bar controller script where I can tint the friendly color for the health bar, one color, and the enemy color, another color. And I also added the flash effect on the fill health bar and added a parameter that allows me to control the opacity, because I don't want it to be pure white, but I want it to be a blend between the base color. So in this case, if you have red and the flash hit is white, I don't want it to be pure white, but I want it a way to just be like, hey, just make it 50%. It still gives it a bright pop, but not so blindingly bright. I think the effect looks a little bit better with this. And for my camera, I'm going to have a simple pan. There's no zoom. There's nothing fancy. This works nicely because less user error. And also it makes target following much easier when you're tracking in game. My game is all about simplicity so I can finish it. The idea is that making sure I define what kind of game am I trying to build and not building more features than necessary to get the functionality that I really want. I think it was like, is it like Dota replay where you can, during the competitions, you can see like camera's kind of smart. When it's in autoplay, I want the camera to be very smart, moving around to what matters. And here it is with all of the things that I've built in this devlog: panning camera, damage, health bar, a floating combat text, flash on hit, and proper spacing. A lot of games that I like to play, like Diablo, they don't have damage meters during gameplay. And I always want to know where my character lines up. But for some reason, a lot of these games don't turn that on. I really don't know why. But in this game, I'm adding a very simple DPS chart. It's going to have 3 tabs: DPS, HPS, which is healing per second, or let's just call it healing, and defense. That's going to be the next devlog, getting this DPS chart working. Working with LLMs, ChatGPT, Gemini, not so much Claude. This is more towards the ones that actually listen. Is very fascinating because I'm very used to working in game dev studios, and I'm usually like the hybrid in between where I'm kind of technical, but I'm very artistic as well. I have the balance between communicating to both sides, and I find it when I'm trying to describe technical aspects of developing for games, I simplify, and then I simplify that again. Because my assumption is a lot of people in a game studio, in a regular game studio, they don't have the bandwidth or the energy to actually read a wall of text. I've developed this thing oversimplifying and then being like, hey, if you have any questions, ask me and I'll elaborate. And in this case, because it's oftentimes this back and forth that happens through email or Slack or other forms of communication that isn't necessarily verbal. It's something that I'm learning not to do with LLMs, but it's also this appreciation for LLMs where I'm like, oh, you actually read and comprehended and acknowledged what I wrote. ChatGPT and Gemini. Claude will just go rogue. Right now, when I'm saying Claude, I'm talking about Claude, Sonnet. I think it's 3.7. But when it comes down to Gemini and ChatGPT, I have this appreciation for, I wrote all those things that I cared about and it read it and it replied to me. And I'm like, oh, wow, you're engaged. It makes it so much easier for me when I don't have to translate things by simplifying, 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 and then simplifying again, because I'm usually solving other people's problems. I'm not used to talking to an LLM where all it's doing is solving my problems. Now, that's awesome. They read, they listen, and they engage. I just mean as it's interacting with me, that's what it feels like. I'm not saying that's what actually is happening, but at the end of the day, I can just judge it by, hey, I had these awesome scripts working in my game. So it's good enough for me. All right. Thanks for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Like and subscribe. If you like this kind of stuff, please let me know. It encourages me to produce it more often. All right. Thanks. Bye.